Welcome to the Obvious Podcast, episode number 41. I'm Sonny Macon, Chief Operating Officer at Associated Builders and Contractors, Florida East Coast.
And I'm Peter Daiga, the President and CEO at ABC, Florida East Coast.
You are listening to the Obvious Podcast, where all opinions expressed are our own, unless we say otherwise.
And love the show? We hope you'll subscribe on any major podcast platform or watch us in action on YouTube. Follow the Obvious Podcast on Instagram, X, and Truth Social. All the links you need are in the show notes. Reach out to us at any time at theobvious@abceastflorida.com. And if you're enjoying the ride, help others find us by leaving a review wherever you listen.
So, Peter, I need to ask you, why are there balloons behind your chair?
Episode 41.
Episode 41.
62 trips around the sun, as some people say.
It's not your 41st birthday?
No. I wish it was.
Well, happy birthday.
Well, not really. Every year gets better, in my opinion. I'm
Absolutely.
very grateful to God for 62 years of this gift of life. So,
that's great.
Anyway, thank you.
Absolutely. We wanted to celebrate you on air a little bit as well. And since we're celebrating, Mr. Producer shared some data points with us about the success of the show. I can't believe we're starting with episode 41. That's like nuts to me.
It is. So thank you all for your support. We continue to grow. We've got 49,000 views on YouTube. A little under 77,000 times YouTube has recommended us. So, you might be watching another video and then YouTube will say you like that video, so you might like this one. Maybe we can get into sometime what we're being associated with. So, in any event.
That's actually pretty cool for our little show, right? Like, we never expected that.
I agree. It's unbelievable. In 40 episodes or 41, so a little over 1,700 clicks on those recommendations, which means about a little under 11% of our audience comes from that, which is great. So we're not only hopefully reaching the ABC family audience, which I think is fairly large.
Yeah.
And by the way, we have an episode today that's of utmost importance, I think, and pertinence to the industry.
Yep.
We want to talk about. So yeah. I mean, we're having thanks for the data, Mr. Producer.
Yes.
The stats are incredible. So, and there's a relation, I think, to the data in our podcast today.
Yes.
And what some people around the country are experiencing, and that if we continue in this trajectory, I was half joking, but I'm serious. We could, expect a little more attention maybe in the future as we continue to grow. Who knows? Which is always the risk,
absolutely. But this sort of democratization of having a voice and being able to speak the truth. Like, I'm so happy that the iron fist of the fourth estate was finally broken by technology, right? That people are able to kind of get up there and talk. And it's so fascinating and interesting to me that you see the left-wing establishment, the media establishment, lose its mind. And the only solution that they have found to all these people having all these voices is this misinformation characterization, right? So if you're not part of our sort of elite cabal, it's misinformation. And there's such a rejection of anything that's contradictory.
And the irony of that on the heels of years now, where the absurdity of some of the lies that have been told have come to light.
Yes.
And I know there's a lot of good videos out there and memes and different things about people listing the list, but some of the ones more in the forefront of our minds. For years we were told Biden was at the top of his game, and that lie has kind of fallen apart. And by the way, I've said to you, I think in private conversations, I mean, I quite frankly, and this is rather bold, but it's coming from my heart. I mean, just about everything about the left is a lie.
Yeah.
And they're going to lie, and they're going to lie, and they're going to lie until they have to or are compelled to give it up. And that's kind of, if you look at the whole Biden lie.
Yeah.
They held to it despite the fact that we saw things with our own eyes.
Right.
There were people in the business even that were basically pointing it out, and of course then they were told, oh well, those are deep state fakes or
deep fakes,
videos, and he's never been more at the top of his game, and now they're all selling books, and they're all, I mean, it's nuts. It's really nuts.
So the hypocrisy of George Clooney drives me nuts. He's at that, and we're going off topic, but I need to address this. He was at that fundraiser in LA. realizes what a loony bin Biden is, doesn't say anything, raises like $30-some million. The debate happens. 7 days after the debate, Biden's got to go. And then he goes on 60 Minutes and says, I had to speak the truth. No, you didn't. You spoke the truth after the debate happened.
It's like all these writers of books now trying to make money.
Jake Tapper. My goodness.
Yeah. It's crazy.
It's okay.
So, but that's just one of many, right?
Yeah.
There's been a lot of lies. And so we got to kind of get into the topic at hand, I think, for this episode, which is, I think one of the lies going back many, many years is that somehow we're all equally supportive of law enforcement and law and order.
Yeah.
And that just really has never been the case, but it's become a little more obvious in years past because there was a direct effort to quote unquote defund the police.
Yep.
All right. So that was an issue a few years back. Well, now it's coming to light because we're actually seeing not only do they want to defund the police, but they're actually attacking them.
Well, there was this conversation recently where the Hakeem Jeffries, who is the House Minority Leader, and has the most irritating way of speaking publicly, like just this weird halting style that just drives me nuts, right? He's literally criticizing ICE agents for covering up their faces.
Right.
Right? Take the masks off.
Right.
But it's your people, the left wing, the left wing violence and the hypocrisy around it is insane.
Right.
It's insane.
Well, apparently the reason they are, which is kind of the direction we want to go with this podcast, the reason they are covering, even though there's kind of a long history of law enforcement doing that for
their own security.
Anonymity and their own security, but even more so now because they actually are, doxing these ICE families and calling for violence against them, and threatening their families. And
I'm sorry, but I love these new mugs, Mr. Producer. Good choice.
They're awesome. So,
yes. Sorry. Continue.
Yeah. Never mind the fact that there's a legitimate reason there, but they never said anything for years. I always was kind of insulted that protesters cover their face, and the left-wing protesters in this country for a number of years now. Yeah, well, never any word about that. And it's like so many things. It's comic in some ways. It's like we have finally found the one face cover that the left doesn't like, because they love the face cover in COVID. Yep. I mean, and they forced it all on all of us, and they love the face cover of the Antifa and BLM protesters. They could cover their face, and even now today at the campuses and colleges and universities, they're kind of covering their faces.
Yeah.
But somehow it's awful that the ICE agents are covering their faces. But anyway, that aside, so
the ICE agent is just trying to protect himself from COVID?
Right.
Like, would you still go after the ICE agent?
That gets very complicated for the left-leaning mind.
That's mind-blowing.
I'm not sure where I stand there. So, but it's been a little more in the news lately. I have an article. You have one. The article I had was the Boston ICE agents are forced to retreat from a murder suspect's arrest.
Wow.
All right. So he was suspected of committing murder, and activists blew their cover. So we haven't even talked about that. Like if they hear you're in the area, they do all they can to make sure people know.
Right.
So we need to start paying attention to this. And there's going to be a direct connection to the industry in a little bit. We're going to come full circle and tie the knots. But you had another article, which was also very recently.
This was in Minneapolis. There was a search warrant being served in a Mexican restaurant as part of a law enforcement
and it had nothing to do with the deportation or immigration, even, ironically.
It had nothing to do with immigration, right? And frankly, they weren't even ICE agents.
Right.
And a rumor spread that this was a raid, an ICE raid, and people showed up and picked a fight with the people there, right? Yeah. I mean, there were like things being thrown and name calling. And the leaders in Minneapolis are like, hey guys, these are rumors, you need to be careful. And then the mayor is blaming Trump for this. Trump has created an environment of understandable fear, created an atmosphere where distrust isn't just a norm. In fact, sometimes it's appropriate. This is the mayor of Jacob Frey, mayor of Minneapolis.
Well, that's pretty typical of the left, too, quite frankly. So, and what our podcast is called The Obvious. For me, it's been obvious for many, many years, if not most of my adult life, that the left is not very strong when it comes to accountability. Yeah. They're always wanting to blame something else. So it's not their fault that they're committing violence on law enforcement officers. It's somebody else's fault for creating an environment of mistrust.
Yeah.
I mean, it should be obvious that a society cannot be structured around that kind of thinking, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you can't say, well, name the illegal behavior. It's not my fault because of the environment that was created around. We just don't, we just don't allow that for the most part.
I'm going to read.
It might mitigate the punishment,
Yeah.
But it doesn't change the guiltness, if you will, of the.
Let me read this quote to you from the sheriff, Minneapolis sheriff. What is her name? Sheriff Witt, W-I-T-T. Yesterday's incident was a criminal investigation, she explained. So putting out the rhetoric that that it was a raid, it was not a raid. Putting out the rhetoric that it was an immigration enforcement, the Hennepin County Sheriff's Office does not participate in immigration enforcement. So to her, immigration enforcement, and she uses the phrase criminal investigation, it's mind-boggling to me that being in this country illegally is no longer considered a criminal issue. All right? She says elected officials have a responsibility to constituents to put out accurate information. They don't have to agree with it, but do not mislead the public, causing more harm to our communities. She also acknowledged, Sheriff Witt also acknowledged the fear in the community and admitted the optics of the investigation weren't good. I don't know what that means, because it was a Mexican restaurant, like they were serving the Warrington.
Right. Who's the one that's really making some very prejudicial assumptions? I mean, they're arresting a criminal at a Mexican restaurant, so it must be an immigration issue. I mean, who are the ones that are making the actual? Anyway,
it's unbelievable.
It is unbelievable. So, but unfortunately, this is really kicking up.
Yeah.
We've moved on the left from a movement of defund the police, which they never quite really abandoned. They kind of abandoned the optics of it.
The labeling, they changed
the labeling a little bit. But we've moved from not only defunding them to outright attacking them. Mm-hmm. And the immigration enforcement is going to continue.
Yeah.
We are January, let me count on my fingers, February, March, April, May, June. We're only 6 months out of 48 months of this presidency.
Yeah.
So
it's going to keep going.
It's going to keep going, all right? So there's going to be no doubt in my mind. The man ran on it. I think the majority of people, even now, even today, it's the thing that he has the strongest support amongst the American public. The immigration enforcement is going to continue, all right? So the question is the American public going to become more aware and push back, in terms of this agenda of violence and defunding, I guess, if you will? I mean, there are outright calls, there have been for a while, about abolishing ICE.
Yeah.
Of course, this president has, by the way, his first term, which was 8 years ago, he was sued, and I think there was a nationwide injunction when he instituted a travel ban against certain countries. Do you remember that?
I do remember that.
Controversy.
Yep.
I think the courts initially did an injunction, and he eventually, if my recollection is correct, won that case.
He did.
So again, the people who are trying to obstruct, and basically say the president of the United States can't determine who can visit the United States was an insane decision, and eventually got sorted out in the courts. Well, just within the last week or two, he's reinstituted some travel bans to countries. The point is, I
do want to point out this Washington Post headline from a few days ago: the mysterious drop in fentanyl seizures on the U.S.-Mexico border.
Yes, that caught a lot of public attention, didn't it?
Mysterious drop
of fentanyl.
What could have possibly changed?
Yeah. You actually stopped the drug lords from actually coming across the border and moving their drugs across the border.
That's a mystery. I'm not sure how that happened either.
Complete mystery to the left, apparently. So, I mean, it's crazy.
But the logical conclusion to your point is the violence is inevitable. You remember those two Jewish Israeli staffers who were killed in D.C.? Executed
on the street.
The celebration of the United Healthcare CEO.
How about the governor of Pennsylvania, who was the governor's mansion was firebombed?
Exactly.
Because he was Jewish. I mean, so yeah. I mean, it's not just. The obviously anti-Semitism nature of this is horrific.
Yeah.
But it's not. It's not limited to that in terms of the less disdain and opposition to law enforcement and law and order. So.
But if you're going to call somebody Hitler for 10 years, right? at some point, people will say, fine, it's worth killing these people.
Sure.
It's fine, right?
And then you have former directors of the FBI saying 86-47. Come on, we all know what that means, right?
Yeah,
I mean, they're not only, again, the obvious part of this podcast is the left has for a long time had disdain and disapproved of law enforcement and law and order. They have for some time called for defunding the police. They now are actively calling for violence against police and law enforcement and ICE.
And Jews.
So in any event, but the immigration enforcement's not going to end.
And Trump's poll numbers on that are off the charts.
They are.
Off the charts.
So in any event, we want to, kind of towards the end of the podcast, a little public service announcement to our members that we think is very important to this.
Yes.
And then part of it is the enforcement's not going to end. All right. So as an industry, obviously our recommendation is I think, although we're not lawyers and we're not giving legal advice, but I think any immigration lawyer would tell you, you got to make sure you're doing as a contractor in this industry everything that's required of you in terms of hiring people who are authorized to work. I think in Florida, and I've said this before, we had a real jump on this because you may recall 2 years ago, there was a big controversy in the state when the governor pushed a legislative agenda and the legislature passed it, where they were going to require. By the way, it was always illegal, right, to hire people who are unauthorized to work in the country. But what was different 2 years ago was the state decided they were going to require participation in E-Verify for contractors or employers, all employers in the state of Florida. Oh, in fact, our ABC chapter, was caught up in that web, and we had to get an E-Verify account and start running every new employee through E-Verify. So I think our state was better prepared for this time.
No, we weren't caught in the web. We just changed our policy to run every single employee we have with E-Verify.
So, but the point is, it did not affect us.
Right.
It affected everybody. In the state. So I think that really prepared the industry because now, 2 years later, when we have a second term of President Trump, where immigration enforcement, which for the most part is focused on some pretty bad hombres, to speak the lingo. We're just, I think, more prepared. So in any event, our public service announcement is, obviously make sure you're complying with the law. But the one thing we do want to convey is there was a large raid that was in the news in recent weeks here in Florida. Happened to be an ABC member, and we were all concerned in ABC of Florida and the 5 chapters, about the potential impact on the industry and how to communicate, make sure you're doing everything. And I had conversations with this contractor, and they assured, first off, their public response was spectacular. They were fully cooperative with the investigation. They fully reassured everyone that they comply with, all the immigration laws and require all their subcontractors to. There are going to be bad actors in the industry, and there's no doubt. We've never been Pollyannish about the fact that there are a large number of unauthorized people probably working in this industry. So, in any event, the interesting thing was that's not what really scared them. What really surprised them after this raid, and this is part 2 of the public announcement to our members, is just make sure you're documenting all your paperwork and complying with all the laws for sure. But the second part is a little bit of a preparation, which the thing that surprised this contractor the most was they were hit with an unbelievable level of threats, not only of their employers or employees of the company, but family of employees, their leadership. Home addresses were doxxed. A lot of their employees were doxxed.
Wow.
They told me that even interns that had less than a month on the job, that had really nothing to do with the company, they and their families were receiving rape threats, death threats.
Wow.
And as a result of all this, the FBI has been involved. But when I first heard the story, I thought immediately, so what's the typical story about hiring illegal immigrants? It's the typical story from the left is,
you're exploiting people.
You're exploiting people. It's actually the business community that wants this,
right?
So of course, when I heard that they were getting all these threats, my initial first thought was, that's awful that the right wing, was doing this to them,
right?
because they were so upset that you employed 100 illegal people on your site. But they were like, no. This isn't the right of center people. This is Antifa and BLM. Yeah. So the irony is the left, who for years has said the business community really is taking advantage of illegal immigrants by hiring them. Now, in this environment we're in, and here's the public service announcement, point 2.0, is that you need to be prepared. There's really nothing you can do because your leadership is on your webpage. Most of probably your employees in some way or another are probably publicly available. Yeah. And even if you were to take that down today, there's crawlers and things where you can go back and look at time. So there's really nothing you can do about that. But probably the best thing you can consider is LifeLock or some kind of personal identity, because that's a lot of the threats a lot of them are undergoing now too, trying to use that personal information to ruin their lives. Yeah. And it's all come from the left, because the left apparently is now claiming that you intentionally had your site raided so that you could deport these people. So for decades, the left said you were taking advantage of them. But now, when your site gets raided and you lose 100 people,
you did it yourself.
You did it yourself because you wanted them deported. And
which tells you they don't.
How is this tied to the overall conversation? It's about violence, right? It's about the left has accepted violence as part of their modus operandi.
Not just accepted it, celebrated it.
Celebrated it and promoting it. And
encouraging it. Yep.
So anyway, just make sure, obviously, this is going to continue for a number of years. I think most of the American public supports him. He won an election based on it.
Yeah.
By the way, one other thing I want to add, which I know we're running a little late. So I said for years, 4 years ago, we had, and the number's in dispute, but it's somewhere between, in my opinion, 10 and 20 million people. We had 10 and 20 million people less immigrants in this country 4 years ago.
Correct.
And 4 years ago, our industry was thriving and managing to deliver work. So in 4 years, if you add 10 or 20 million, now granted they're not all working in the industry, but there's probably a lot of them are trying, and what the president's trying to do is deport as many of them as possible to get back to a position we were in 4 years ago. I think we're going to live. I think we're going to survive is my point. So, but be prepared, do everything according to the law. You ought to be prepared for, if something were to happen on your job site, actual violence and threats from the left. That's probably the one thing that you wouldn't have anticipated that now you know. Yeah. So thanks to the experience of our members and ABC trying to spread that
the professionalism our members bring into to every day, Anyway, we hope you enjoyed this conversation, and we thank you for your time, and we look forward to seeing you next week with another episode on Friday.
And for comments, send us an email at theobvious@abceastflorida.com. Till next time.
Take care. Bye.